Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, I'm Dr. Doreen Downing, and I'm host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. And what we do here is to invite guests who have a story about finding their voice. And today, I'm so excited about introducing you to somebody that I'm just meeting for the first time today, Renee Bauer. Hi, Renee.
Hi, we're going to be good friends by the end of this time together.
That's actually something that the listeners enjoy because it's so engaging. You and I just develop a friendship. Sometimes I fall in love. So it's really it's so amazing to have people who have struggled and then have found their way out and then can teach those who are still struggling. So that's what today is about. You sent a bio, and because you're an award winner, I want to read it. And okay. Renee has been a divorce attorney for 20 years. She is the founder and managing attorney of Happy Even After Family Law, located in Connecticut. Renee is also a co-founder to a platform for tarot card readers called the Tarot Bridge. Renee Bauer is an international speaker, author of 3 books, and I might as well just say what they are because people could find them. Divorce in Connecticut, The Ultimate Guide to Solo and Small Firm Success, and the children's book, Percy's Imperfectly Perfect Family. What a range that you've got. One other thing, you host the annual She Who Wins Summit, a life event created to inspire, motivate, and challenge women to move forward bravely. I love that word, bravely, in their personal and business lives. Her impact has been recognized by Success Magazine, where she was nominated as a Woman of Influence and with awards such as Litigator of the Year, Woman-Owned Business of the Year, and New Leaders in the Law. Oh, how does that feel to hear all that back?
It's kind of crazy, right? Because I almost feel like every stage was like none of it was a big deal. But then when you put it all together, and I don't think we take enough time just individually to like look at our lives and be like, wow, like I did a lot. And actually like appreciate that because we're so busy of like what's the next thing, or I didn't get everything I wanted. So hearing that is it gives me a moment just to be present and just to take it in.
Great. I'm glad I read it and that people, my listeners, are hearing what you bring today to all of that experience. But what we usually do is we don't start there. In fact, that's pretty much true, right? Our past is, and I think that's one of your perspectives and some of your messages is that the past is what shapes us today. We just don't want to get stuck in it. And I know I just want to mention the book that's being launched recently, and I want to say that before we dive in. And your book is She Who Wins. Ditch your inner good girl, overcome uncertainty, and win at your life. Renee, such a powerful message. And I know in all the interviews I've done with people that when they finally get to writing something so powerful for other people to help them change their lives, that it comes from deep struggle. So
Yeah.
let's start there. Usually I like to do that and then roll into the journey about how you found your voice. But let's just first focus on, well, what was some of that struggle early on? But where were you born, by the way?
I was born in right outside of Boston, Mass.
Okay.
So if you hear the accent, that's where that comes from. But it's funny, when I started writing this book, I thought that the struggle came from, I'm twice divorced, right? And I had a lot of shame around that. And that is what I talk about. And I thought that that's where it sort of started. And then as you sit down and you write and you start peeling the layers back, you realize that the struggle goes back so much further. I love this question because if I really think about what was the start of this, before I got to the point of
Yeah.
being married twice, being divorced twice, it was like, what was happening? And I share in the book, and it was the first time I've actually ever spoken about this, was I had so much shame because my parents had money struggles when I was younger, and my mother started cleaning houses. My parents took on a job cleaning medical buildings at night, and I was a teenager.
Mm.
And before I could go out with my friends, before I could meet up with them, we all had to go to this medical building and we had to clean the building on a Friday night. I did the barrels or I vacuumed, and I never talked about it because I was embarrassed. I would show up late and I'd see my friends and I'd be like, oh, yeah, yeah, I'm visiting my grandparents, and never told them like what was actually going on. And into my adulthood, when I started my own business, I realized I was holding on to that because I was then cleaning my own office because I'm like, I'm not spending the money to hire a cleaner because it was such a scarcity mindset around money. It was always like, what if I run out? What if there's not enough? And I realized, oh, I have a lot of work to do around my own money stories that go back to that time, that shame about worry about not having enough, which once I changed that, then my business started to do really well. I hired more people. And it wasn't like I had to hold on so tight because I knew it would flow and I knew it was energy, but I really had to grapple with that. And so when I was writing that story, I was like, you know what? It's time to talk about that and share that part that I just sort of tucked away and it doesn't come up for me anymore. So I never thought about it, but now's the time to put it down and talk about it.
Good. Already, there are a couple of points that I think people can relate to. One is the hiding that you did in order to not feel like you were, to expose the truth of what was really going on. You had to hide. So that was one thing. But the other was the whole idea about money and how we are valued, and it's our worth. Isn't that a strange word when it comes to money and our self-perception? So that's pretty amazing. And thank you for unzipping that moment. I think that's the kind of thing that reaches people, is saying, oh, wow, she really had a moment in her life where she was struggling to come out and be comfortable with herself and her family.
Yeah. And as I look into my adulthood and the decisions I made in my own marriages and almost staying in a second marriage that was not great at all. It was toxic, and almost staying because of this concept of, one, what will people think? Which goes right back to
Yes.
that time of like, I don't want my friends to think of me any differently. And then having again that attachment to, what does my money situation look like if I walk away from this? So it was this theme, this through line, and you start to unpack that stuff and look at it from like, almost remove yourself. Like, it's not my experience. I'm going to look at it as if I don't even know this person. And you can see it so clearly. But when you're in it, you can't. You're so close to it that you're holding on to that fear. And I love how you talk about worthiness, because I think that worthiness applies to so many women have worthiness issues about love and about money and about confidence and about having a life that they love.
And what you're linking, or what we are linking together, is that fact that some of these questions about how valuable am I are related to earlier life experience. And you've just really put a highlight to that so that folks can, that's one of the things. Hey, listeners, look back. If you're struggling now, look for roots in your own life.
Yeah. And we see when people don't do that, right? I'm sure you see it all the time. You see the cycle repeats itself. And it's like pressing play on that button. And we have an opportunity to break that story and change that story. But we also have an opportunity to stay stuck in that and live that same pattern that our parents lived and their grandparents lived. And it's our power. We have to be proactive about it and not just be like, well, it just happened to me. This is just the way things are. Yes, you have had things happen to you, but now you get to decide differently. and you get to not make that be the story that carries through to your entire life that you pass on to your own children and grandchildren.
Oh, I'm laughing and smiling and just feeling so energized already by you because of the power of know what you're saying. This image I have is of wearing like this suit, this armor, I guess is the idea. And we do call that in psychology our personal armor, but the armor doesn't free you up to expand and open your arms and open your heart and let yourself out, your voice, because that's actually what we're talking about today. Find your voice, change your life. So what you pointed to us today is, hey, maybe that powerful voice is tucked way back when. We've got to go help her release her.
I love what you just said too, is that concept of armor, because I've never actually looked at it that way, but I've always felt like I had to show up suited up, right? And like being protected all over. And it wasn't until I started to slowly drop those pieces of metal and actually be vulnerable in a really real way that things changed. I'm currently married for a third time, and my husband called me out in the best way possible and said, "You're not being truly vulnerable." And I knew he was right because I was still protecting myself. It was like, listen, what if this doesn't work out? If it doesn't work out, I need to be protected. I have to protect my heart. I have to protect my wallet. I have to protect everything. And it was like, wow, I am not allowing myself to actually fully show up to this relationship because I'm so afraid of having a repeat performance of the first two. That changed everything. Our relationship, our ability to communicate, to deal with conflict. It was like when you show up vulnerably, it allows yourself to, I feel like, heal, to be the best partner, to love fully. That was a lesson it took until I'm in my 40s. And I would say it took until this decade to really understand that and get that down.
Oh, I'm so touched. My heart is opening up to you, and I feel a little misty
Mhm.
and teary. So you talk about dropping the armor, and do you have some story that you might show us about? Well, I know that moment you talked about with your partner saying, "Hey, you aren't being vulnerable," but what does vulnerable mean? How does that armor begin to crack, or at least drop down? I just realized there was this image I have about this quote about the light within, and in the cracks is where you see the light.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I love that quote.
any personal story you might have around the experience of dropping your armor or piece of it.
I Yeah, so going into my late 30s, early 40s, I was hyper independent. And because it was like, I need to financially support myself now that I'm a single mom. And I'm going to protect myself and my son and everything, my bank account, like everything. That was sort of how I showed up. I was like 75% there. I don't think I actually really understood that I was doing that until I was truly with a partner who was safe.
Mm.
And, I can't say there was a one moment, but it was a trusting the relationship and watching it unfold and seeing how safe it was to have conflict, to have disagreements, to speak and say, I have something to talk about, and not have those words twisted and just to be heard. And that progression of that relationship as it unfolded was where I started to drop that hyper independence and I started to open myself up more. So it was really a progression of time. It wasn't like a one moment thing. It took time for me to trust and for him to show up all the time and be like, you can ask for help. I'm here. I want to see all parts of you and not just the strong parts and the badass parts and all of that. I want all of the stuff. And I think just looking back at all of the relationships that hadn't worked, marriages and boyfriends and all of that, and never actually really experiencing that, was the moments, I would say, the moments of really realizing this was why you got divorced twice. This is what you knew was out there. You just didn't know what it looked like.
Oh, Renee, I feel like I'm in a mirror. This is so amazing, the story that you're telling about a relationship being a journey to finding more parts of you, which is the voices that were afraid. And mine was about abandonment. And every time my husband went on a business trip, I messed the house up. I didn't do dishes. And when he came back, it was a mess. But he'd laugh about it and he'd start cleaning it up. I so love this idea that you just shared, is that it's a process, folks. It's a process finding your voice, and being vulnerable is something that can be possible more when you find safe people. And when you're with toxic people or people that don't bring the best out inside of you and that don't listen and aren't there, then that's dangerous. It's toxic.
Yeah, if you asked me the flip, like, was there a moment when you knew that someone wasn't right? And I was in this second marriage and I didn't recognize who I was. There was a moment when we were fighting, we were in my kitchen, and I picked up a fork from my kitchen table and I brought it up over my head and I brought it down on the ground as hard as I could, to the point where it left like a hole in my floor. And I realized I don't know who this person is, because I don't lose my temper. I'm just not an angry person. I don't have anger problems. I've never have. And yet I couldn't even see myself because I was so triggered. And all of this emotion bubbled. That was a moment where I realized we are not good for each other because we don't bring out the best. It is not a safe relationship. That was an absolute defining moment where I said, I need to change, or you will not like yourself if you stay with this person. Because I turned the mirror on me. I don't like to be, oh, he did this and all that. I'm not doing that. I put the mirror on me and said, why did I allow this type of relationship into my life? It's time to evaluate and say what was going on, that this was okay.
Oh, thank you for being so honest and so forthcoming. I'm going to take a brief break and we're going to hear more about your journey to find your voice.
If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com.
Hi, we're back with Renee Bauer, who's written a book, and we're going to be talking more about that in a second. And it's She Who Wins. And it's about ditching the good girl, and it's about finding your, well, for me, it's about finding your voice. I mean, she didn't use that language, but it seems like that we are talking about the same thing. When you find yourself, when you find your power, there's the voice that needs to come out. And you need safe environments, you need people who are supportive of you. And this book, I think, is one of the ways in which people who are listening today might be able to get some hints. And we get to talk to Renee and hear more specific, any more stories about finding your voice in the ways that you have as you journeying into a life that was more suited for you.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. It's ditching your inner good girl is finding your voice, and it's doing things your way, and it's shunning what expectations that society and other people have on you. And it's saying, you know what? I don't need to smile more. I don't need to be a people pleaser. I can have really strong boundaries. That's what it means to ditch your inner good girl.
Uh-huh. So you say ditch, but it's a part of us. Where does that good girl go? I just got curious. The
Great
little one.
question, right?
She tried.
That's so funny because if no one's ever asked that, I don't know, where is she? I mean, I think she's still there. But I think you allow your authentic self to shine. You allow that internal voice and that intuition to really speak more than anyone else. And so you're not ditching her because really is still there, but you're just allowing her to be really authentic to who she is. And you don't have to show up a certain way just because you think that's what you're supposed to do. You get to make disruptor decisions, and you get to be a little unruly and speak your truth and not worry about if people don't like you. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Oh, this is so much fun. Bringing out more about what you believe. And so this whole idea of the good girl, and what I said just a second ago, is like, oh, she tried, didn't she? He really was trying to survive in a world. One thing you haven't used, and I'm actually pretty glad that you haven't used the term imposter syndrome, because that's such a popular phrase right now, and I think it's kind of overused. But in a way, what you said was the same idea, pretending to be somebody that is trying to put on some kind of impression or an image that isn't really true because it's more based in fear.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny because I don't use that word imposter syndrome because I feel like it's watered down.
Yes.
But I love the concept of doing things afraid. And even though you have fear, because there isn't anything that pushes us or challenges us, there's fear around that. Like there is a fear of rejection around that or falling flat on our faces. And that's why we don't do it because we want to be safe. Our head is telling us, play it safe, play it small. You won't get hurt that way. But you're not actually putting yourself on the line. And the flip side to that is, so what if you fall on your face? So what if you get rejected? So what if it doesn't work out? Because what if it does? Imagine what happens if you keep going despite all of that rejection, because rejection is inevitable, failing is inevitable, but you do it anyway because eventually you're going to outrun all of those rejections. Eventually you'll outrun your fear and you'll see the other side of success. The example I use is this book. I received 113 rejections from literary agents before I got the one yes. And then when I got her, we got countless rejections from publishers, but I knew that there was a place for it. And people kept telling me, you need to niche down. You have to be specific. And I'm like, no, because the things that women have issues with, every woman has an issue with. You don't have to be a CEO in order to have concerns about communication or conflict or issues on how to show up in a society that tells you to be smaller. You can be a stay-at-home mom and still have those concerns. So many women have worthiness issues or body image issues and relationship issues. The topics cover so many women that I know, from those who stay at home and those who are seven-figure earners. And I refuse to accept the publishers. Their feedback was that I had to be really specific. And one publisher said yes. And so it's like those stories of rejection. It was like I knew, I believed in it so much. My agent believed in it. And we kept going until we got that yes. And it's like, imagine if I quit. 50th literary agent rejection, or when we got the 5th publisher rejection, it wouldn't be out in the world. And the feedback that I have is women are saying that it's transforming their life. I'm like, imagine all of us have these big dreams that we maybe haven't acted on because we're afraid of what happens if we fail at it. And we don't want to like have to say we failed. And I'm always like, you know what? Let's celebrate our rejections. Let's announce them loud and proud and be like, yeah, I didn't get the job. So what? But you put yourself out there for it. That's the exciting stuff.
Oh, I love that. Loud and proud. Well, I have a similar story about my approach to helping people find their voice, and that often I'm kind of niched into being a public speaking coach, which means get up on a stage, take a microphone, and do a perfect presentation. It's more kind of like an act. And I agree with you. You and I ought to do some programs together. And this is so true that it's just speaking up in a relationship, in a marriage. Hey, I didn't like that you left the coffee beans spilled all over the counter this morning, or just anything that feels like a woman moving through society. I say that life is your stage, and that sounds like your message too, is be who you are, be loud and proud. The question I have has to do with courage, not confidence. And that to me feels like what you're also pointing to. So what would be some ideas, tips on how to be finding the courage within?
I love that, especially in the context that you help people who want to be public speakers, because that is something that I've always wanted to do as well. But I also have this fear of public speaking. So go figure. But I was just knew I was so called to it. And it's funny because it's like when you go on stage, and now that I started doing it, I don't always have the confidence, but I do say I have the courage. And sometimes you just put one foot in front of the other and do it anyway. What I do is right before I step on stage, I take a lot of deep breaths. I do a little affirmation mantra to myself as to like asking to carry my message the way that it's meant for, as using me as like a channel for it so that it can touch somebody, because it's not about me, it's not about ego. Usually that's what does the trick in order to switch that over to a little bit of confidence of being like, this isn't about me, it's about touching even one person out there who needs to hear this. It's things like that, and then just rinse and repeat in doing it. And practice, I think, builds confidence and courage because it gets a little bit easier every time. I would be lying if I said that I still didn't shake before I went on. Of course I do, but as soon as I step on, something else takes over. And it's like that courage speaks through my words. And it's no longer like I'm not afraid anymore about what is someone thinking about me, or am I going to say an or forget where I am. No, I know my material. I know what I have to say. So now it's just having the courage of putting that mic on and going out there and doing it.
Oh, that's a wonderful image of the courage that lifts you up so that you become the channel of your passion, and that your passion races through you, arises and reaches the listeners. Well, we're coming to an end, but before we do, I want you to give us anything else about your book that you could encourage people to say, let's go buy it because what she has in it can help me. So anything that you want to say about your book?
Yeah. So it's kind of like the anti-self-help book, because I've read a lot, and what I found missing in self-help books was storytelling. I wanted to write something that would move someone to tears, move them to laugh, move them to action. So it's filled with stories. I have heard they have made people cry. I have heard that they've made people laugh. I throw myself on the line with the stories that I share. I just lay it all out there and say, hey, this is my story. I bet you have something similar. But I do teach a framework in there to help you get really clear on what you want and be able to take action. And it's something so simple that you can take with you and apply to every single time you come up against a decision or a crossroad and you're trying to figure out what's next. You can apply this 3-step framework every step of the way, and to really, really get clear on what you want and how to move through the excuses and then put that into action.
You know, I'm going to ask this. I'm not going to ask all 3 because I want people to read it, but give us a hint on one, the first step.
So yeah, 1 doesn't make sense without the 3. So I'll do it really quickly. The high level is every decision you ever make, you can stop, drop, and roll through it. Everyone knows what stop, drop, and roll means, and it was meant to like extinguish or put out fire. And we're twisting it up and we're using it to light up your life. So every time you have a decision, you're going to stop and assess and make sure you're being guided by your heart and your intuition and not your head or ego. You're going to drop your excuses, because those are the things that will hold you back. And then you're going to roll into action. And that's doing the next small thing. And you're going to state with clarity and specificity what that action is in order to create the momentum. And when you stop, drop, and roll through every decision, you will always win. Because no matter what, even if it doesn't look like what you want, on the other side of that, you've moved past stagnation and you've put things into motion.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked. And I'm glad we didn't just get the stop.
Yeah, right.
I understand how it all makes sense. Thank you so much. I was going to ask one last word from you, but stop, drop, and roll seems like that's a good ending for us all.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun. You asked some hard questions, so this was really fun.
Oh, good. Yes. Well, I enjoy you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person Doreen interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.